Hashtag she walked out of the hotel to find her car missing. When she got home, what she found was even worse. It started with a matchbook. A thin, wine-colored matchbook from a place called the Lantern House, tucked between the seats of my wife's SUV like a secret trying to get caught. I'd never heard of the Lantern House. I'd never seen my wife smoke. And when I flipped it open, someone had written a time on the inside flap in blue ink. 9 p.m. Thursday, in handwriting that wasn't hers. My name is Grant Holloway. I'm 41 years old, and I own a plumbing company in Western North Carolina, the kind of company that starts with one truck and a prayer and, 12 years later, has 23 employees and contracts across 6 counties. My father was a plumber. His father was a plumber. The Holloway name means something in this part of the state. It means we show up, we do the work right, and we don't cut corners. I built my reputation on that promise the same way my old man built his, one honest job at a time. I met Jenna at a friend's engagement party 14 years ago. She was leaning against the bar, laughing at something the bartender said, and the sound of her laugh hit me somewhere between the ribs. Auburn hair, green eyes, a crooked smile that made you feel like you were sharing a secret even when you weren't. She worked in interior design back then, staging homes for realtors, making empty rooms look like someone's dream life. We were married within 2 years. Bought a farmhouse on 3 acres outside Asheville, white siding, wraparound porch, the kind of place you picture when you think of settling down. No kids. Jenna said she wasn't ready, and then she said she wanted to focus on growing her firm, and then the years just passed, and I stopped bringing it up because I didn't want to be the man who pressured his wife into something she didn't want. The night I found the matchbook, I walked inside and asked her about it casually, the way you'd ask someone about a grocery receipt. I told her I'd been cleaning out her car and found it wedged in the console. Jenna barely looked up from her laptop. She said one of her clients had given her a gift bag from some boutique hotel opening and there'd been a matchbook inside, and she must have tossed it into the car without thinking. She said it so smoothly, so naturally, that I almost believed her. Almost. But there was that handwriting on the inside, 9 p.m. Thursday, and Jenna's clients didn't write meeting times inside matchbooks. I slid it into my jacket pocket and said nothing else. That night I lay beside her in the dark, listening to her breathe, and I felt something shift inside me, a hairline crack running through the center of everything I thought I knew. Once I started looking, I couldn't stop. The signs had been there for months, stacking up like loose bricks I'd refused to see. Thursday nights. Every single Thursday for at least 10 weeks, Jenna had somewhere to be. A site visit that ran late, a client dinner she couldn't miss, an industry mixer she'd forgotten to mention until she was already putting on lipstick. She'd come home smelling faintly of perfume I didn't recognize. Not her usual scent, but something darker, headier, the kind of fragrance you notice in the elevator of a hotel lobby. She'd started showering the moment she walked through the door, something she'd never done before. Her phone, which used to sit face up on the kitchen counter charging all evening, now lived inside her purse, and whenever it buzzed during dinner she'd glance at the screen and flip it over with a casualness that felt rehearsed. New clothes appeared in her closet, dresses I'd never seen her wear around me, heels still wrapped in tissue paper. She'd started going to the salon every other week instead of once a month. Her nails were always done, always perfect, in colors she'd never worn before, deep burgundy, matte black, like she was dressing for someone who appreciated the details. I pulled up our bank statements online and found charges at restaurants 40 minutes from her office, gas station fill-ups in towns she had no reason to visit, a recurring charge at a wine bar called Ember that I'd never heard of and that she'd never mentioned. Each detail alone meant nothing. Together they formed a picture so clear it made my chest ache. My younger brother Cole came by the shop one evening while I was closing up. Cole ran one of my crews, a dependable guy with a good heart and a tendency to say too much after 2 beers. He leaned against my desk and asked me if everything was all right, said I'd been looking rough lately, like I wasn't sleeping. I told him it was just the stress of a big hospital renovation we'd bid on. He nodded, but something flickered across his face, a hesitation, a thought he swallowed before it reached his mouth. Then he asked if Jenna was doing okay, and the way he said her name, careful, measured, like he was handling something fragile, made my stomach drop. I didn't push him. I just filed it away alongside everything else. The confirmation came on a Thursday the way I knew it would. I hired a man named Walt Shipley, a retired sheriff's deputy who'd gone into private investigation after 22 years carrying a badge. Walt was 60, built like a mailbox, with a face that had seen every kind of human ugliness and stopped being surprised by any of it. I'd used him once before to run background checks on a subcontractor, and I trusted him to be thorough and quiet. We met at a truck stop diner off the interstate, and I gave him everything: Jenna's schedule, her vehicle details, the matchbook, the pattern of Thursday nights. Walt didn't offer sympathy or judgment. He just took notes in a small leather notebook, asked precise questions, and told me he'd have answers within a week. The following Thursday, at 9:47 p.m., Walt sent me a photograph. Jenna standing outside room 214 of the Lantern House, a boutique hotel nestled in the hills east of town, smiling up at a man whose face I recognized instantly. The man's hand was on her waist. They were stepping through the door together, and in the yellow glow of the porch light, Jenna looked happier than I'd seen her in years. The man was Craig Barlow, my business partner. Craig and I had formed the company's commercial division together 5 years earlier. He'd brought capital and connections. I'd brought the crews and the reputation. We'd split ownership 50-50, drawn up an operating agreement, and shaken hands over beers on my back porch. He'd been to my house dozens of times, eaten meals Jenna cooked, helped me hang Christmas lights, sat in my living room watching football on Sundays. He was married to a woman named Dana, and they had 2 daughters, Lily, who was 9, and Sophie, who was 7. I'd watched those girls grow up. I'd bought them birthday presents. And now I was looking at a photograph of their father walking into a hotel room with my wife. Walt's full report arrived the next morning in a manila envelope left on the seat of my truck. Timestamps, license plate records, photographs spanning 3 consecutive Thursdays. The pattern was mechanical in its consistency. Jenna would arrive at 8:30, Craig at 8:45, and they'd stay until just past 11. Walt had also pulled Craig's financials through public records and flagged something that made the affair feel almost secondary. A shell company called Barlow and Ridge Consulting, registered to Craig alone, that had been receiving wire transfers from our business account. I called my bookkeeper, a woman named Diane who'd handled our numbers since the beginning, and told her I needed a forensic audit of every transaction Craig had touched in the past 8 months. When she called me back 2 days later, her voice was tight. $173,000 had been siphoned out of the company through fabricated vendor invoices, all routed to Craig's shell entity. He hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He'd been robbing me blind. I sat in my truck outside a job site and made 2 phone calls. The first was to a divorce attorney named Russell Pace, a man known throughout the county for being surgically precise in high-asset separations. The second was to a criminal defense referral line, because I wanted to know exactly how much prison time Craig was facing for embezzlement before I offered him the alternative. Russell reviewed my prenuptial agreement, which I'd signed before the marriage, protecting the house, the business, and all premarital assets, and told me Jenna's position was almost indefensible. She'd get her personal belongings and nothing else. Tennessee recognized fault-based divorce, and with photographic evidence of a sustained affair, the prenup would hold like a steel beam. I told Russell to prepare the papers immediately and to freeze every joint account by the end of the week. Then something happened that I hadn't planned for. Jenna's younger sister Megan called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice shaking so badly I could barely make out the words. She asked me to meet her at a coffee shop near her apartment, said she couldn't live with what she knew anymore. When I sat down across from her, Megan told me she'd known about the affair for 6 weeks. She'd seen Jenna and Craig together at a restaurant in a neighboring town, confronted Jenna privately, and been sworn to secrecy. The guilt had been eating her alive. But that wasn't the worst of it. Megan told me Jenna was pregnant, 8 weeks along, and that Jenna had already retained her own attorney, a woman specializing in asset protection, because she suspected I might eventually find out and she wanted to be positioned to fight for the house and a share of the business. She'd been laying groundwork while I was gathering evidence, and neither of us had known the other was preparing for war. I drove straight to Russell's office and told him everything. The pregnancy changed the calculus but not the outcome. Russell said we'd demand a paternity test the moment the child was born, and that the prenup's enforceability wasn't affected by a pregnancy conceived during an extramarital affair. He accelerated the timeline. Papers were filed on Wednesday. Accounts were frozen by Thursday morning. And I spent Thursday evening sitting in the dark of my living room, waiting. Jenna came downstairs at 7:15 wearing a dress I'd never seen. Something dark green and fitted. The kind of thing you wear when you want someone to look at you and not look away. She told me she had a late client walkthrough and might not be home until 11. I told her to drive safe. She kissed my cheek, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just the flat, hollow absence of something that used to be there. She left. I waited 15 minutes. Then I got in my truck and drove to the Lantern House. I parked 3 spots away from Jenna's white Lexus. Craig's charcoal BMW was already there, nosed into the space closest to room 214. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, watching the curtained window, the faint blue flicker of a television behind the drapes. Then I got out, crossed the gravel lot, and knocked on the door. I said one word, management, in a flat, bored tone, and the door opened. Craig stood there in an untucked shirt, barefoot, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to absolute terror in the space of a single heartbeat. Behind him, Jenna was sitting on the edge of the bed in a hotel robe, and the sound she made when she saw me wasn't a scream but something worse. A short, choked gasp, like someone who'd been holding their breath for months and finally run out of air. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I walked past Craig, pulled the divorce papers from the inside pocket of my jacket, and set them on the bed beside Jenna. I told her she'd been served. I told her the accounts were frozen. The house locks were being changed that evening by a locksmith I'd scheduled 3 days ago, and that her car, the white Lexus sitting in the parking lot, was being repossessed within the hour by a towing company I'd arranged through a contact at the dealership, because the vehicle was titled under the business and she had no legal claim to it. I watched her face as each piece of information landed. The divorce, the accounts, the locks, the car, and I saw the exact moment she understood that this wasn't a confrontation. It was a demolition, and it had been underway for weeks before she ever knew the first wall was coming down. Then I turned to Craig. I told him that a forensic audit had uncovered $173,000 in embezzled funds routed through his shell company. I told him that criminal charges were drafted and ready to file. I told him he had exactly one option: sign over his entire stake in the business, return every stolen dollar, and walk away permanently or face prosecution, and that his wife Dana would be receiving a full copy of Walt's surveillance report by certified mail the following morning regardless of what he chose. Craig tried to speak, tried to form some kind of explanation or defense, but nothing coherent came out. He looked like a man watching his house burn from the inside. I walked out of that room and crossed the parking lot to my truck. As I pulled away, I saw the tow truck's headlights turning into the lot from the main road, right on schedule. Jenna would walk out of that hotel to find her car missing, and by the time she figured out how to get home, a cab, a rideshare, Craig's BMW if he had the nerve to drive her, she'd arrive at a house with new locks on every door, her belongings boxed and stacked in the garage with a padlock she didn't have the combination to, and a notice from Russell Pace's office taped to the front door informing her that she had 72 hours to arrange retrieval of her personal property before it would be placed in storage at her expense. 3 weeks later, Craig signed everything. His half of the business transferred to me in full. The stolen funds were returned via a cashier's check his attorney hand-delivered to Russell's office. No criminal charges were filed, per our agreement, but Craig's marriage to Dana didn't survive the photographs. She filed for divorce within days of receiving the report, took the girls, and moved to her parents' home in Virginia. Craig relocated to Florida, broke and disgraced, and I never heard from him again. Jenna's attorney fought the prenup with everything she had, arguing changed circumstances, arguing that my conduct during the confrontation constituted emotional cruelty, arguing that the pregnancy entitled her to a share of marital assets. Russell dismantled every argument methodically, citing the ironclad language of the prenup, the documented infidelity, and the fact that every asset Jenna was claiming had been mine before the marriage or earned through a business she had no ownership stake in. The judge ruled in my favor on every point. Jenna received her personal belongings, her clothing, and nothing else. The paternity test came back 4 months after the baby was born. The child was Craig's. I felt something when I read those results. Not relief exactly, but a kind of grim confirmation, the final piece of a puzzle I'd already solved. I had no legal obligations. Jenna was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, working a staging job for a small realty office that paid a third of what she used to make. The life she'd built, the farmhouse, the business dinners, the salon appointments, the closet full of dresses. All of it was gone, traded for Thursday nights in a hotel room that smelled like someone else's cologne. My brother Cole came to my office one afternoon, sat down across from me, and told me something I'd already figured out months earlier, that he'd had feelings for Jenna, had carried them quietly for years, and had never acted on them but felt he owed me the honesty. I told him the difference between him and Craig was simple. Cole had a conscience. He looked relieved, and I meant what I said. Loyalty isn't the absence of temptation. It's the choice you make when temptation is standing right in front of you. Jenna's mother, a woman named Pauline who'd never liked me much to begin with, showed up at my office one morning without an appointment and told me I destroyed her daughter's life. I let her finish. Then I told her, calmly and without raising my voice, that her daughter had destroyed her own life, that I had never cheated, never lied, never stolen, and that every consequence Jenna was living with was the direct result of choices Jenna had made, deliberately and repeatedly, for months. I told Pauline that if she wanted to be angry at someone, she should start with the person who'd thrown away a marriage, a home, and a future for a man who was simultaneously stealing from her husband's company. Pauline left without another word, and she never came back. Megan stayed in touch. She'd call every few weeks to check on me, and I appreciated it more than I told her. She'd chosen honesty when it would have been easier to stay silent, and that kind of courage doesn't go unnoticed. She told me once that she was sorry for not telling me sooner, and I told her that she told me when she could, and that was enough. I sold the farmhouse and bought a smaller place closer to town, a brick ranch on a quiet street with a workshop in the back where I could think. The business grew. Without Craig's interference and his phantom invoices draining the accounts, profits climbed steadily. I promoted a foreman named Davis, a man I'd worked alongside for 8 years, to a junior partnership. He earned it. I trusted him. And trust, I'd learned, was something you gave carefully to people who'd proven they deserved it. Some nights I'd sit on the back porch with a glass of bourbon and think about that matchbook, that thin, wine-colored rectangle that unraveled everything. If I hadn't found it, I might still be living in that farmhouse, lying next to a woman who'd learned to lie the way other people learn to breathe, married to a version of my life that was hollow at its core. Finding it hurt, but not finding it would have been worse, because the truth, even when it burns, is better than a beautiful lie you're paying for with years of your life you'll never get back. I learned that the hardest kind of strength isn't the kind that lets you tear something down. It's the kind that lets you walk away from someone who doesn't deserve you and build something better on the ground they scorched. That's what I did, and I never looked back.